Julie, is this your new office in the library, or is this a different place?
No, this is the library. I'm on the second floor above the lobby. I say I'm the mad woman in the attic, which is appropriate.
No, I think you guys have a really great space over there now. I'm glad you were able to move.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Hello, Gretchen. I think we're all starting to trickle in a little bit.
How's it going, guys?
Very well. On this rainy day, trying to stay warm. I don't know what it is, but like when it rains, it like sinks into me, and that's when I get the most cold rather than on a snowy day.
Yep.
I'm jealous of your creative space, Gretchen. You put it together well with all your pictures on the back wall and everything.
Yeah, I like it. I do need a new computer. This one is getting really slow. But yeah, other than that, it's great. And my kids are in school now, you know, as opposed to when it was originally set up. So
All right, let's see who all's here.
Michelle, I had a couple of students talking about Ireland already.
Oh, good.
Tell
I'm
them
glad to
to
hear that
apply.
that is still going to go on.
Oh, it is, right? Yeah, I
We
hope
need
so.
more applicants, so please send them my way, tell them to apply. We would love to have them.
Are you the next chaperone, or what? I know Penny Avery was supposed to be, but I don't know if she still is.
She was supposed to be there right now.
Okay.
So I'm there in 2023, and I believe Stephanie in 2020, or I'm there in 2020 the next time, and Stephanie the following year.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize. That's cool.
Hi, Stephanie.
Steph, are you going to bring your whole family, or is it just going to be you over in Ireland?
No, that seems really far in advance, so we'll see.
Gotcha.
I'm just going to hope that it goes through, right, Michelle?
Start talking to your first year students now.
I have mostly graduates. That's the problem. So
everyone else, start talking to your first year students now about Ireland.
Stephanie, I'll go like carry your bags or something.
it seems like you could, if you wanted, you could email the inquiry and expression distribution list that like went out for this reading and see if you can do some Zoom drop-ins or class visits for Ireland.
Gretchen, that's a great idea. I've sent personal emails to all of my own students from this last fall that I thought you should consider it. But you know, the sooner people start talking, I should start talking about Stephanie's year to them.
Yeah.
All right, let's see, where are we? Okay. Well, I believe we are recording, so I will begin. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos. Today, we are beginning our second talk for AQ Writes. And so part of the Contemporary Writers Series, the events of the year, we have inaugurated this new week celebration called AQ Writes. And so yesterday we had one of our alumna who is a poet, and she was the first Grand Rapids Poet Laureate. And now she's come out with a new book called The Blue Divide. And so she read from that collection. And today we have different faculty and staff and others listening in on today that will be presenting from their creative work. So the point of this is many of us know that we write academically, but not everyone knows that we write creatively as well. And so my name is Dr. Shelley Rotschafer, and I will be presenting last, but today in our order of presentations, first we have our poets, and each poet will read 2 or 3 pieces and perhaps give a short explanation of their inspiration, and then the next poet will read. And so first we have Dr. Gretchen Rumer and Dr. Michelle DeRose, Dr. Stephanie Boulder, and our Writing Center coordinator, Julie Bevins. And then to finish up the day will be our fiction authors, and we have presenting Dr. Dan Mancia and then myself. And thank you everyone for being here, and stay tuned for on Thursday with the same link where we have current students and recent alumni who will be presenting their work. So our first poet is Dr. Gretchen Rumer.
Great. And Shelley, just like I did yesterday, I'm happy to share the authors for next year at the end of our time together, if that would be helpful. So just ask me to if you want, later. And I've got it pulled up, so I'm happy to do that. Okay, thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Shelley, for organizing this week. We had such a great reading yesterday, and I think it's really nice we can continue with the momentum with this focus on faculty and staff, and then our focus on current students and alumni for Thursday. So this is really cool. My first poem, and I'm only sharing one published poem today. The rest are going to be poems in process, but my first poem is titled Credo, and it was published in the Patterson, the Patterson Literary Journal, I believe. And that is a journal that's edited by Maria Gillian
Mazzetti. Mm-hmm.
Yes, right. So anyway, she was a former Contemporary Writers Series poet that came to visit at Aquinas, and it was really nice to establish a relationship with her. And my time with her just when I visited the craft talk was super generative. So I'll go ahead and read this poem, and then I'll read a few more. So this is titled Credo. I trust my memory of that first unsolicited toothless grin, the delegation of tendon, of wrist, eye, and knee as you crawled toward me. How you now form words from morpheme and image as you read. In your own hands, deities craft words and pictures into being. So when your reason stretches beyond my provision, when you move to unbelief, I will marvel at the magic prevailing to knit you together. A weaving of phenome, of genome that pigments freckles and fleshes elbows, the tidy circus of thoughts that tell stories, a maze of quickening neurons matching skirt and sock, your lost tooth tenderly tucked between my dust-caked shoes and empty purses. And several of my poems have come out of my English 265 writing marathon. It's an evening that I set aside every fall for students in my Writing Center Theory and Practice course to just celebrate their identities as writers. And it's a wonderful way for me to celebrate my identity as a writer too. I generate pages and pages of academic prose every semester, but I rarely have time to write creatively. And so I treasure that time that we have. This poem I started and is in process, but started it this past fall, and it's a copycat poem in the spirit of Maggie Smith's Goldenrod. So I'll go ahead and read this. I promise I'm not picky, and you knock, too timid to ask, being told so long that you're not clear or you don't know enough to open your mouth, to raise your voice. Here, stacks of books and snack wrappers cluttering this space, the north window casting afternoon shadows on my desk. I see your thoughts for what they are, in spite of what everyone else told you. Listen, I see you. I see every mark you've noted in every book you haven't read, every thought you've started and haven't risked, those you have refused to believe or chase. Green beans growing in wet dirt, your sister helping separate seedling from weed, that first betrayal when they chased you away, that Friday night when you opened your car door to the hitchhiker and your parents thought you were somewhere else. You don't need to forgive everyone who has wronged you, but whatever your stories are, tell them, repeat them. I will listen. Look, even as you doubt, your eyes are bright, meadows blooming with story. Whatever you are, wherever you are, let me name you. Let me call you writer again and again. So you can probably see so far that I get a lot of inspiration, not only from my teaching, but also from my students and from my children as well. So the next poem I wrote for my daughter, Andra, who is now 11, but I wrote it during a writing marathon, and I think it was when she was a little younger. This is titled Matins. In the morning when I rise, give me knotted blankets, solace from the open window. Though today's sun warms snow and sheets, let the moon light your face when I wake in winter darkness. I rise, reliving the fuzz of your hair, black as tea leaves, unbuttoned nightgown, your mouth lazy with sleep still at my breast. I beg you, give me the crisp of toast, the smear of an unwashed face, sour, unbrushed teeth. I remember the knobs of your knees pressing belly and bone. Even now as I warm milk and cinnamon at the stove, even now, daughter, give me this, a memory of you in sleep and life. And this is a poem that I also wrote during a writing marathon, but I was thinking about places that stick in my memory of my childhood. And my grandparents had a place in Rockford, Illinois, that had a creek and also had a stable. They had horses and chickens. And so when I think of my childhood, I often think of this space. So I'll go ahead and read this one titled The Stable. You saved candies sticky in their wrappers for ghost horses, oats at the bottom of the bin, more meal than grain, must of grass and leaf bits blown in after every mowing, and an old couch, now a sausage broken from its casing. You stacked barn wood taken from other stables like the teeth of a zipper off track, and stuffed cigar boxes with coupons. What to do with crushed acorns and mildewed dolls, their dresses soiled, and magazines stacked and rippled and stuck. Curry combs turned barbed wire rusty, and lipsticks from summer rides with boys, their foil ground and flattened by hooves. Saddles chewed by nesting squirrels hang next to moth-ragged wool blankets, smelling of Appaloosa, and the red incubator, feathers curling, tendrils on perfect panes of glass. And the last poem I'm going to read, I wrote during the Todos Santos writing workshop, which was one of the most transformative and beautiful experiences I've had as a writer. It was a writing workshop with Christopher Merrill, who teaches at the Iowa Creative Writers Workshop, but most notably in their international writing program, more with the translators. And I spent 10 days writing and walking and eating ceviche and watching whales breach. So, I mean, I don't think there's a better experience we can have as writers. So, I'll go ahead and read this. So, and I should tell you, the inspiration from this poem comes from a ghost town that I visit in Colorado fairly regularly when I get out to my parents' place. It's a ghost town titled St. Elmo. The name of it is St. Elmo, and there's a legendary person who the general store is still there, but her name was Annabelle Stark, and she was one of the last residents of St. Elmo when it was a ghost town, when the rail wasn't even going through the town anymore. And she was hideously filthy. Like when they removed her from her surroundings, they had to surgically remove her hairpins from her scalp. So I just remember that image in my mind. I remember what it must have been like for her to live in that space with her brother, and what would possess her to continue to stay there even when the train had stopped running through their little town. So this is titled Chalk Creek, and I'm hoping to write more. I'd like to make this a series of poems. Dirty Annie, Chalk Creek. Everything I need is here. Rags for patching wall holes, kerosene for my lamps, my water jars, my skillet for salt pork and mush. Hens roost in one corner, laying eggs in the newspaper clippings. The rooster wandering at will, hawks catching on bedclothes. I watch through soot-streaked window for landlopers, vagabonds that happen upon my store. I can sell them buckshot, bottles of tonic, fishing lures and a length of line, tins of spinach and sardines, their labels torn by bloat. The promenade leads past the aspen grove, derelict mine trail, town hall, then post office, the school ghost-like, and Chalk Creek warming, swelling, rich with trout. I remember taking the stagecoach to Salida long after the rail left town, the weathered cliffs of creolinite washing down river towards this place where I stay. And that's my last poem. So I'll hand it off to the next poet.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you, Shelley, and all of the Contemporary Writers Series committee members for this idea. It's nice to be able to share, and a special welcome to all the students online right now. I'll be reading 3 poems. They are my most recent publications. So the first one, if you want to find it, it's online. It's in As You Were, the Military Review. It's in volume 14. As you might guess, this was a journal devoted to veterans and their families and the impact that their service has had on them and their families. I am not a veteran, but my father is. He was the company commander of the 37th Medical Battalion in Vietnam from June of 1967 to 1968. And I was with him the weekend of June 2017, 50 years after he served. And I guess for some of the younger students here, you might need to know that mail then was all snail mail. And if you wanted to send mail overseas, it had to be labeled airmail, and there was special lightweight envelopes and stationery in a distinctive blue color that felt really more like tissue paper than like stationery. So you would need to know that to understand one of the images. This is called Retrospective. One Sunday in June 2017, a brim against the midday sun to protect his patchy skin, my father described that year's ritual. Always a faithful scribe, each Sunday, he reread the epistle sent 50 years before to his wife and 2 kids from his tent in Vietnam, where he treated snake bites and inoculated children, severed limbs, sutured wounds, extracted bullets, and assigned time of death until, at week's end, His thoughts and time turned spouseward to ask if the 5-year-old corrected his backward 6 and B yet, if the 2-year-old still trailed a blanket behind her everywhere, willing the flimsy blue sheet into one for himself, to scroll along the silky edge and find the spot that smelled most like home. Okay, the second poem is in Making Waves. It's a West Michigan review. It came out this past fall. I guess one thing that perhaps would help to understand the first image in the poem is it opens up with the idea of bog bodies. If you're unfamiliar with bogs, the peat in a bog works very much like the deep water in Lake Superior. It's an amazing preservation medium. So every once in a while, when a body is unearthed from the bog, archaeologists and anthropologists get very excited because the bog will preserve even hair and skin and clothing, and it gives them a chance to understand a lot about ancient history. And what many of these bodies have revealed is that they were primarily young adults, either murdered or ritualistically sacrificed. This one is dedicated to Beverly. That would be Dr. Beverly Trezek. She teaches at the University of Wisconsin right now. She was a childhood friend of mine. We've grown up together. This is called Easter Morning in Chicago for Beverly. Bog bodies may reveal the tale of their demise, but leave little in the peat about how their siblings arose to live the next morning. So we'd meet in our mother's town on pilgrimage from Iowa City and Madison in an annual April ritual. We'd drink until we could dance, dance until we couldn't drink, and drive pre-dawn from downtown to separate suburbs with a towel and Diet Coke, arrive just in time to wash and don a modest dress, spend the required hour swallowing, counting on deep breaths to still the rolling stones of our stomachs. Our mothers counted on the sunrise. Our brothers would have joined us on the floor, but were preserved at 20 and 24, while we each advanced by degrees. And this last poem, this third one, it's in the Dunes Review. It is so recently out that I literally picked my contributors' copies off the front porch about 15 minutes ago. If anyone is interested, we'll be hosting a online launch on Friday evening at 7. So if you're interested, let me know and I will share the Zoom link as soon as they share it with me. This is also a dedicated poem. This one is dedicated to Susan, and that would be Dr. Susan Hayworth Hepner. I know the faculty members online will remember her as a recently retired, beloved member of the Women's Studies and Sociology Department. And Susan's adult son, Luke, who had been our student, was killed in a car crash one May. And we didn't see Susan over the summer until the next fall when we gathered for the Fall Institute. And I was asked to give the invocation. So this is Autumn Sestina for Susan. Nothing heals without pain. It's the same ritual every fall. We move to the road the week's leaves, a splayed hand with excess fingers. The rake scrapes in the grass, lines that lead to curbside mounds. As the colorful piles mount, our lower backs twinge with pain we address with scratched red lines. The neighbors' children shriek and fall, hurl to the sky with fat fingers, confetti swirls of heaved leaves. At what point is childhood left behind? When did our aches surmount our mother's caress with gentle fingers? Her hugs, no longer anodyne for pains, and her arms, too weak to stop our falls. When did deeper worries trace lines? Life does not move in the measured lines of middle school history. Our leave takings can surprise. Some born in spring die next fall, so grief may mount. The question's when, not if, with pain. And some knots can't be eased with fingers. Practice in your hair. Rake your fingers along your scalp deeply enough for lines. The tingle between relief and pain is unpredictable. It comes and leaves. The cat purrs and claws at the fur, mounding off the comb as it falls. So crimson maples tremble, detach, then fall. We might twirl them between our fingers, then toss them on growing mounds. We learn to color within the lines we can bear, knowing that some leavings surpass our threshold for pain. In every curbside dome of leaves is the first that fell. Our own fingers must manage the lines that push them through pain to soft mounds. Thank you, and I will hand this off to our next poet.
I think that's me. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephanie Boudelier. I'm in the School of Ed. Thank you, Michelle and Gretchen. I should have gone first before our English professors, that's for sure. Michelle, that last poem was just heartbreaking, especially knowing Susan briefly. So thank you for sharing that. The three poems that I'm going to share today have all been published, and I decided to go with a theme of alcohol and music. So a little bit different than Gretchen and Michelle's theme. So my first one is published online on Monofiction Literary Journal. It's an online journal. This one was written during COVID times, inspired by my husband and I meeting at a brewery on Valentine's Day. It's called Origin Lager. Let's meet between the hops vines, somewhere hidden from the smell of stale IPA fermenting on the floor. Let's move our eye contact over the crowd of drunkards, somewhere away from small talk of booze and novelty. Let's stop whispering to hear smelling each other's breath of brew. Somewhere we can malt into each other, making this part of our perennial narrative. The next one I'm going to read is published in this literary journal. It's called Shamoop Urban. It's based out of London. And so there's international contemporary writers who have published work in there. The poem that I wrote early during COVID when we were completely isolated. And I was kind of inspired by the idea of wondering if we would ever be allowed to go to crowded concerts or clubs or music events. And so that's kind of what inspired this poem that I'm about to read. It's titled Morning After Mingling with a Mob. Blisters burn as bunions grow, dancing until dawn. Damn those daring moves. Bulls bleakly glow in sandstorms, running from guilt, running for glory. Stomp, stomp, clap, stomp, stomp, clap, violent headache from victory in the last 5. Ceremonious celebration and congratulations. Sugar, alcohol, new beginnings ooze out of pores. Elated energy, searing sounds, countdowns. Ruinated resolutions already reduce potential. Musical mosh pits do not mute the motion of waking to throbbing tendons and tears. Dreams of crowded cesspools are crushed. Isolated indoctrination, the immaculate hangover. The final poem that I'm going to read today is actually in Bridge the Distance. It's an oral history compilation of teacher poets writing during COVID. And so this one is published in there and also part of oral history. So those of you who are interested in joining our own oral history project at Aquinas, there's a variety of ways this might end up looking. And so it is called Rhythmic Run. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to play music in the background. As well, I invite you to attempt to see how many songs you can identify in my poem. And I'll let you know how many there were at the end. Hopefully that's not too distracting to your listening. Rhythmic run. Ready, set, run. Earbuds, forte in my ear. Legs in adagio, ain't nothing but a gangsta party. Feet shuffle, my arms forward, shoulders pop with caprice, to a bitty bitty, zoom or waka. Andante sways my core into cadence, won't back down. He may be pulling my hydration out, harder, better, faster, stronger. The rhythm near my drums, there's a tempo in my stride. Blinding lights, on the other side, an ensemble of emotions and goals. Sweat with every roll of the heel, the longer I pace with the lyrics, the deeper my thoughts pitch away from the mad, mad world. Escapism through a runner's high, even when my feet feel like titanium, I run the world. Thank you.
Feel like I'm stepping out of the club outside into the cool air. Thank you, Stephanie.
Julie, it looks like you were dancing and talking, but I
I
can't hear
was. You had me. Thank you. I'm going to read 3 poems as well. Only the first one was published. I decided to take one from each section of my life, 3 sections of my life. And I confess that I don't often even try to get my poems published, which I don't recommend to all you writers out there. I don't think Emily Dickinson is the way to go, but I do tend to shove them in a drawer. So this one was from the Dyer Ives competition, 1998. It's based on an experience I had in my undergraduate years at Western Michigan University. My friend Linda's mother was diagnosed with cancer, and we journeyed with her group of friends until her mother's death right before we graduated from college. So this is called Maxine. This china teapot, which bears no hint of its previous owner's passing, or her pain, nor the suffering of her children as they watched her go, rests on a shelf in my living room, faces forward, shows its rose pattern, spout curving upward, slender handle gold-edged. I approach. Almost 7 anniversaries since Maxine's death, recalling from my Catholic education the significance of the number 7, the eternal, the infinite, how long it must seem for Linda since she and her mother embraced. And I hold this gift from Maxine's daughter, delicate proof that she was here, that she remains in more than the shell of this fine home for dust or light or tea, but in the resurrection of a memory of arms raised in song and prayer, a rainbow through the back door, a calling out for angels, and Linda's rage accompanied, it must have been, by the rage of angels who sang with her, sing still, even if Linda holds to a delicate faith, as strong as this teapot, as fragile as flesh, as sure as the life of the woman who rests in this poem, in this teapot, this gift which has held on to me, been a blessing for me, who never saw or touched Linda's mother, but only felt her grace and loved her daughter. So this next one arose out of an experience when I was a grad student at Michigan State University at their writing center. Fun fact, I went to school with Dr. Jennifer Dawson there. And we used to just share poetry with one another, just hang out together in the writing center and share what we had been composing. And it was inspired by a section I saw in a Ripley's Believe It or Not book, with all those images and stories. And at the same day that I saw this image, I had been to Mass and I'd heard a reading from Romans, which the combination of those and brought this poem about. This mystery. I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery, brothers. A hardening has come upon Israel in part, and thus all Israel will be saved. Romans 11. I read in Ripley's Believe It or Not, and I do, of a girl who daily pulls a shard of glass from her temple. Each morning she is compelled to extract the sliver, which overnight rises sharply to the surface, comes to a point, and agonizingly remains until heated. Occasionally, when she pries gingerly this splinter from her head, she passes out from the pain. Other than that, there are no obvious side effects. If you'll excuse the small and permanent open wound she hides beneath her bangs. Scientists cannot explain this physiological anomaly any more than they can really, I mean really, understand how lightning strikes, volcanic eruptions, or the impact of meteorites turn rocks into glass. Long ago, some travelers built a fire on a beach in Syria. They rested their cooking pots on nitrate blocks and went to sleep, waking to discover the sand miraculously transformed into a hardened blanket. This was around 5000 BC. So here we are, more than 7,000 years after a bunch of awestruck merchants tapped their toes against a glassy desert, wondering what secret sand scratches against a child's skull and heats to intensity in the night. What pressure forces the thin, transparent knives through her skin? Of course, the scientists have taken tests and measurements, and the photos are glossily before me in the book. We publicly consume her suffering. See how she stands silently before a table filled with glass pieces, jagged and remarkably clear. Her mother is beside her, staring impassively, unsurprised, having witnessed so many years of pain emerging from her daughter. Considering perhaps the sheer razor mosaics tumbled in her own heart, or all the shards of glass still unrevealed. And then I have a pandemic poem too, because we writers couldn't do anything else but write about the thing. When it first hit and we kept hearing that we needed to stay 6 feet apart, I was both fascinated and disturbed by 6 feet, which is the depth of a grave. And that which kept occurring to me, in addition to this encounter I had with someone in a grocery store, led to this poem. Standing in line at the grocery store during a pandemic. At a grave's length, we survey one another, considering the distance, assessing the space between us. Is it even possible to know what is safe? The experts tell us where and when to go, what to wear, how to treat our neighbors, friends, and family, the ones we've loved for a long time. They tell us what is best for them, especially for the most vulnerable. We should stay away until they are dying, but even then, maybe it is better for everyone they die alone. More sanitary. As much as possible, no touching, moments, final or otherwise. We need to be thinking of the big picture more than ourselves. Each person here is studiously avoiding crossing paths. It is almost comical the out of ways we've learned to go, obediently following signs designed to keep us apart, in line, extending life for one, for all, something like that. It is hard to keep up with the rhetoric and the rules. Even the questions, protests, and riots are confusing, distracting us from what is right before us, still visible. Your sorrowful gaze, which a mask cannot hide, and the hesitation, God forgive me, with which I did lean forward to grab your hand, and grateful sighing breath as we made a connection, defying everything, including death.
All right. Am I next? Oh, okay. there's so much to live up to now, following all these wonderful poets. So I want to apologize if it looks like I'm glowing, just because I'm in my office in AB and I had to close the window, and it's always like 90 degrees in here. So it's a little bit stuffy in here right now. So I'm always jealous of poets because you all get to explain your poems and talk about them and then read them. And when writers of prose, fiction writers, I mean, we have longer pieces usually, so we feel like we need to just read it, right? So it's kind of nice that I get to read some shorter stuff today. So the pieces I'll be reading, it turns out they're from a collection of short stories that I didn't plan on writing, that's just about done and about ready to go out into the world. I had been working on a novel, and I'm still like on the third draft of that, but then it was kind of stop and start with a lot of other stuff going on, like getting married, having a child, starting my new job at Aquinas, the pandemic, and all that fun and not so fun stuff. I take little breaks, not necessarily intentional breaks from writing the novel. And yeah, little things. These breaks would normally just come about as like being stuck on something in a novel and then putting it down and then just being preoccupied with something else. And lo and behold, I end up with a bunch of stories, and they're all related. I didn't know what they were related as I was writing them, like most writers, I think. It wasn't until after I was about halfway through. So I'll read those, a couple of those really short ones, and then yeah. So the first one I wanted to share came from a writing prompt at a literary magazine. It was one of my favorite ones. It just closed, actually, Midwestern Gothic, and they had a photo prompt for this contest. And if you don't mind, I'll just pull the photo up that I wrote to. I never recommend, like, to my students to, like, if there's a contest and there are like specific guidelines, I never recommend coming up with something off the top of your head to like write. It's like usually like if it really speaks to you, then go ahead and write. And they'd done a few rounds of this contest, and none of the photos really spoke to me. And as soon as I saw this one, I knew exactly what I was going to write about, because I write about the same characters and same settings over and over again. So and the other thing about this one, I grew up in a neighborhood, the house behind us was a Roma family lived there, American Gypsy family. And I thought that was like completely normal growing up. I didn't know it was unusual to have, Roma people living in your neighborhood. And I didn't realize how marginalized they were. So this group of people appear in my fiction, and they are kind of like these scapegoated people, and it ends up kind of reflecting more on the other people in the community. So this one's called "The City Will Make Gypsies of Us All." Stash Duda carved the gypsy girl's initials into his desk on Thursday. Friday, the school's doors were padlocked, desks heaped on the lawn. Gypsies vanished. Could have been a con, Halloween mischief, but it was only the 1st of October. Maybe a gypsy curse, their parting shot at us. Had we treated them so bad? Hadn't the school opened its doors to them? They weren't loved, but they weren't run off. That's the best anyone can hope for here. The city will make gypsies of us all. Uncle, cousin, teacher, neighbor. Sister Mary Magdalene, who's not a nun and not always a whore, lammed it because of delinquent parking tickets on that rusted out van where she slept but never turned tricks. Angelo Pulaski did 9 months in Gary after he couldn't square things with Lefty Schurz over some bad luck at the dog track. He came home July 5th, the day after Lefty caught his own bad luck, a seeing eye slug, 38. Just some jerk across the alley popping off patriotic rounds. First of the month eviction notices, Blackhawk style. Apartments turned inside out, Fishkill rotting in the sun, Bitsy Mendez in her house coat shouting, "Look what them sons of bitches done," while corner boys, buzzard circles, swoop in, fly away, just looking for now, giving Bitsy a chance to haul off her shit before they do. Neighborly courtesy, because hard times are just times in Blackhawk. Could be them next. It could happen, our city's unofficial motto. The tomahawks could crawl out of the cellar, sweep Joliet, knock off Muskegon, make a run at 4th place. LaSalle could add another shift if someone with clout raised hell about that Moon Crater Foundation developers abandoned years ago, convinced them to build something there with good LaSalle steel. The black-haired beauty, the gypsy girl in 3rd period geometry, could be making eyes at Stash Duda and not the quarterback behind him. It could happen. So the corner boys just circle Bitsy Mendez for now, estimating values of old bras, broken recliners, picture albums of long dead strangers. Stash couldn't imagine there'd been rent on the school where time was spent like a LaSalle mill worker spent his paycheck Friday nights. The way Stash's dad used to piss away beer money, grocery money, rent money, setting up rounds for the house, big man at the tavern. What debts had Stash incurred? What calamities set in motion when he carved the gypsy girl's initials into his desk? In Black Hawk, it's easier to see the beginnings of things and harder to see their ends. She told him winter would come early, begged him to leave with her, promised herself to him if he did, promised to read his fortune, stroke his lifeline. But she didn't reveal this future to him. So now Stash holds vigil atop those desks, reading their braille of carved graffiti, gnawing at their petrified chewing gum, searching for her name, hunting for her taste, yearning for her return, praying it could happen, it could happen. All right. So the other one I wanted to read has not been published yet. I kind of can't talk about it, or I don't want to. It's like a finalist for something in like a dream journal. And so just the, the superstitious writer in me doesn't want to say and then have it not come out. So, but you'll all be, I'm sure you'll all know once it comes out because I'll probably won't stop talking about it. So this one, I was trying to give myself a problem to solve as a writer, and it's often how I get started with my writing, where I kind of just don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, how can I work on whatever rhetorical problem it is as a writer I'm struggling with? And this one, I wanted to see if I could compress time. I wanted to try to write about a character's entire life without, in a page or two. And also, I didn't want that character to be like the main character in terms of the point of view character and commenting on their life. I wanted it from all these other voices. So in my fiction writing class, we talk a lot about like how time works in fiction. So I wanted this to kind of just be this almost like montage of this person's life. And this is another recurring character in these stories. It's called The Last Known Residence of Angelo Pulaski. The last known residence of Angelo Pulaski was not the Prospect Arms Hotel, 2025 Pere Marquette Boulevard, room 2D, lot changed, personal effects, Cochise aftershave, 9 La Mancha Lager tall boys, Blackhawk middleweight championship with KO Chico Padilla, round 9, inked on strap, held as collateral for back rent. Not held as collateral, but just as inaccessible to Angelo Pulaski were those treasures he'd stashed under the mattress. Studded rosewood nunchucks, yellowed photograph of Angelo Pulaski and his brother-in-law, Chico Padilla, both men shirtless, both men still in fighting shape. Padilla showing off newborn son like a trophy. Pulaski in similar pose with jug of gypsy wine. El Maestro 1 month written on back. Promotional flyer for Davina Kipka when she was Club Beiderbecke's featured dancer and not just a weeknight pole spinner, lipstick smudged kiss over her name and phone number. The last known residence of Angelo Pulaski was not the Locust Street Projects, Building A, apartment 521, where he'd shared Davina Kipka's bed the nights she wasn't on the pole at Club Beiderbecke. Not apartment 524 with Remedios Ramirez, who, though not a pole dancer, spun Angelo the right way during those solemnities when Davina swore herself off him 40 days at a stretch, because Davina Kipka would tell the other dancers who hadn't seen Angelo around the club in a while, he breaks me like Lent. Angelo Pulaski's last known residence was not the north stairwell of the Locust Street Projects, Building A, where he'd slept after Davina Kipka told him a thing or two about Remedios Ramirez and put him out for good this time. First time he'd been locked out of room 2D felt temporary. Luther Martini, Prospect Arms night manager, gimmicked up a padlock adverse to bolt cutters and tacked a thesis of unpaid days and weeks to the door, a kind of standing 8 count. Just a pause, just a stutter step until Pulaski found his footing again. That flops for guys on the bum, nothing aspirational about getting back there, Angelo's sister Lorna told him and laughed at his misfortune in the way only another unfortunate could. Because this was around the time Lorna's man, Chico Padilla, split from Milwaukee in an old flame, a former ring girl who inherited a Mitchell Street tavern. Angelo bunked on Lorna's front room sofa then, watched his nephew, Maestro, for her while she picked up a second shift, flipping burgers at Beef Chalet to cover Chico's missing paycheck. Not long after Chico bolted from Milwaukee, Al Vargas fired Angelo Pulaski from the peon work he'd been putting in at Vargas and Sons Wrecking Yard. Had some words with Angelo about sleeping on the job, about stashing car parts for the Trans Am he pipe dreamed of rebuilding. Magnum TA, Pulaski would christen it when he was finished. Al Vargas wove those jabs into combinations about Angelo's fighting days. Punchy, Palooka, has been, never was. That's when they started chucking junk car parts at one another, then dueling with rusty tailpipes across the wrecking yard and up Chicago Street, halfway to his old neighborhood. Pulaski hadn't set foot inside the house at 50 Leonard Street since he was 16. That house, just downwind of the LaSalle Iron Works, would be razed along with the neighboring ones, sold to a developer known for putting up liquor stores and currency exchanges around Black Hawk faster than the ironweed and bull thistle overran vacant lots. Like the one across the street from Pulaski's childhood home, an old shoe factory burned to the ground and went to seed decades before he was born, where Angelo Pulaski camped out as a boy, played in the ruins of the factory's foundation and breached castle walls, repelled Confederate charges, scaled sheer cliff faces searching for Andean cloud cities, mythical places like the new subdivision in the forested highlands of Sauk Point, the place developers broke ground on but never completed. Bankruptcy or some legal tap out absolved them from making restitution, from returning even modest down payments like Angelo and Davina's. Nothing to reclaim, no one to prosecute. The last known residence of Angelo Pulaski was not the holding cell of the 3rd Ward precinct or the drunk tank at the city jail on Ransom Road. His last known residence was not the back booth at the Acorn Inn Tavern, where regulars could nod off before hitting the bricks, not the crash pad above the Acorn Inn, a room with no lock and no number, a room with the word room spray painted on the door. From that room's grimy window, one could just make out the blighted elms lining blocks of bungalows where babushkas and abuelitas staked chains around their patches of grass, green thumb rosaries to ward off dogs and delinquents, which didn't stop someone from passing out in Bitsy Cantu's front yard Saturday night. Angelo Pulaski or some tavern rat wino, who could be sure? Even those kids old enough to remember Angelo, not for his days in the ring, but for the Indiana fireworks run he'd make for them every July, couldn't vouch that it was Pulaski and not just another punched up martyr like the ones in the windows at St. Alphonsus. Where his nephew, Maestro, his uncle always called him, lights a votive for Angelo Pulaski, recalls his uncle's advice about taking a punch, about never jumping up after a knockdown. Better to slow roll it because only suckers fight for points. Get your wind, come up swinging, chase that knockout. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Dr. Shelley Rotschafer. I'll be the last presenter today. I teach in the Spanish section of the World Languages Department. And let me quick type in the chat a link if you'd like to what I'm about to read. It is from Tiny Seed Journal. And this piece is an excerpt. It's called The Eye Dazzler. And it is from a larger work in progress that's called Close Contacts. And many of the characters in this piece are Navajo, and I would not call it Native Lit because I'm not Indigenous. However, I do focus on a family that is Navajo that lives on the Navajo Nation in parts of Northwest New Mexico and Northeast Arizona. And it focuses on their lives, their close contacts, and their community's challenges during COVID. So like many of my other co-authors, we're writing about our current times. This is called The Eye Dazzler. The main character is Johona, or Jo, and also she lives with her grandparents. Many of these homes are multi-generational homes. And in Navajo, the way that you say maternal grandfather is Shitse, and how you say maternal grandmother is Shimasani. The Eye Dazzler. Jo pulled into the Ancient Way Cafe. Her old red and rusted Ford 150 idled in the gravel lot. She felt a bit nervous, but figured this was her inn. Ever since she let Grandma Nola know that she wanted to take up weaving, her road to that path began opening. First, a new loom lofted in the living room space next to her grandmother's. Then a new basket filled with her own carding brushes appeared on the coffee table before the TV. Even Grandpa Tony took them in hand during Judge Judy. In between yelling at the plaintiffs and reaching for the remote, he would stroke out a few swipes on the wool to pluck out goat head thistles. After work, Jo shed her scrubs and pulled on a flannel shirt over her tank top and her favorite pair of jeans. She perched on the edge of a wicker back chair and contemplated the next row on the rug that was growing from the floor sanction toward the ceiling. This was her winding down process from the day. It enabled her to meditate and calm her thoughts before she joined Shimasani and Chite at the dinner table. Each strand of yarn tapped down into place represented a patient. How the yarn wound back and forth between the warp and the weft threads was the winding path they needed to take on their road to healing. Each strand was metaphorical. Would it lay straight and tap down easily, or would it need coaxing into place? The same could be said with her patients at Rehoboth McKinley Health Services. Would they take those steps toward health? Would they wear a mask, wash their hands, and practice social distancing? Would they circle into their close contacts, or would their community extend out far-reaching? Would they believe the vaccine would work? Or would they doubt the Belagana medical system that had institutionally betrayed them in the past? Johona had finally finished her very own first rug. It had taken a while, even with Grandma Nola's persistent guidance. Sometimes her grandmother agreed that a strung needed to be unwoven and attempted again. Sometimes she reminded Jo that rugs, like people, are beautifully imperfect, and those imperfections sometimes are the things that make them and us that much more valued, loved, unique. So her rug dazzled the eyes with a slight bulge here or a nearly the same shade yarn finishing out a line, but it was an authentic eye dazzler pattern. And for her first finished piece, she was proud. Johona had the rug folded on the passenger seat. She brought it to the Ancient Way Cafe at Winslow's suggestion. Win sells some of his piecing work there, and since Tracy worked there too, Jo figured she had as good a chance as any, even if it wasn't expertly executed like her grandmother's pieces. She was learning, and she had the patience to get to that next level. Sitting silently with her grandmother was a new way of meditating. It also was a means to communicate without words, but in action with one of her most cherished people. Merely by being together, lost in their own contemplations, had helped bring the calm to Johona's life that she had been needing. Now that she was down Rama way, she was nervous. Jo was excited to try to sell her piece, perhaps outright, perhaps on consignment. It would be a nice contribution to the cheese finances. But also, it was Johona's subtle way of sharing part of her cultural heritage and that generational knowledge that Grandma Nola passed down to her. When advised to write a short artist statement that she could display next to her rug on the wall, he said that her explanation would entice those eating in the restaurant to buy because it created a personal connection with the tourist, to the place of El Moro, and to Jo's cultural legacy shared in her weaving. Jo searched for the words to describe her connection to her piece and her grandmother. It made her feel vulnerable, yet proud. When she arrived in the parking lot, Jo spotted Tracy walk from the RV and cabin section of the property, carrying an empty laundry basket into an open door shed. Jo slid down from the driver's side and whistled out to Tracy, who turned, saw her sister-in-law, and waved to her inside. Stepping into the cement floor outbuilding, Johona saw the whirling washer and smelled the toasted fabric softener in the air. Tracy set the laundry basket on the dryer and pulled the latch wherein dried towels tumbled onto the floor. Both Tracy and Jo bent to rescue the freshly warm towels, bumped heads, and in their wincing pain started to laugh. Dang, you got me just right, Jo. Tracy rubbed her head with one hand. Johona lifted a towel to her nose. I love how laundry smells out of the dryer. What are you doing out here on a Saturday? It's your day off, no? Asked Tracy. I was hoping you could walk in the cafe with me and help make introductions. I finished my first rug and I have an artist statement too. Yeah, when Win was here last, he mentioned you might stop by. He says you're pretty good. Help me fold this load and put them in the cabins. Then I'll walk over with you. Johona doubled the towel and placed it in the basket. Tracy met her hand in a fist bump. Sisters, we're in this together. After placing fresh towels in the deluxe cabin, the two women walked through the pinon stands toward the cafe. Jo opened her passenger side of the truck, untucked the statement from the folds of the rug, and handed the paper to Tracy. Wow, you did that? Remarked Tracy as Jo lofted the weaving in the air. Jo nodded and smiled as the front door to the cafe opened and Tracy's boss called to them. Hey, Tracy, bring your friend over. You're Johona Chi, right? Let's talk some business. Thank you for listening, everyone. That concludes our AQ Writes for the day with all of our faculty and instructors. To close, Dr. Rumer will share a listing of our next season, season 26 authors that will be coming fall 2022 and spring 2023. And as you can see, our theme of that year is Native Voices in Literature.
Shelley, I'm happy to just leave this up until the meeting is ended.
Okay.
Just a reminder, Thursday, same time, same Zoom, students and alum from AQ will be sharing their work.
Yeah, that was all very beautiful.
Thanks again for coordinating, Shell.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and everyone. I so much enjoyed everyone's pieces. Bravo, brava.